I understand you might be busy, but I'm not going to be ignored. This sales practice is predatory, and I intend to prove it.
Look, I've already explained the terms. The cars in the back aren't available right now.
I understand, but I am determined to find a solution that works for me. I'll wait.
The soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound in the dealership showroom as Maya Jones moved past the rows of gleaming new cars, her footsteps echoing off the polished floor. She'd been eyeing the Ford Explorer for weeks, the SUV she thought would be perfect for her growing family. Today, she was ready to make her purchase, a fresh start after years of saving. But as she approached the counter, her excitement faltered. The salesperson behind it, his name tag read Lance, didn't look up from his phone, his fingers tapping impatiently. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but wary. "I'm interested in the Explorer." Lance finally glanced up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "Yeah, you'll want to talk to someone else," he said, his tone flat, dismissive. "Try the used cars." Maya froze, the words sinking deep into her chest. She could feel her heart pounding, the heat rising in her cheeks. He didn't even blink as he gestured toward the back of the showroom, not a shred of concern on his face. It wasn't the first time she'd felt this sting, this cold wave of being dismissed, underestimated, but it was the first time it had felt this stark, this loud. "Excuse me." Maya tried again, but her voice wavered. Lance looked up briefly, his lips curling into a forced smile. "Yeah. You can't afford that one." The words were like ice, chilling her to the bone. She stood there, trembling, unsure whether to scream or run. The weight of it all, the years of being overlooked, the fight for recognition, it all felt too much. She turned to leave, but just as she reached the door, she heard the familiar click of a phone camera. He had taken a picture, and that would be the moment everything changed. Maya Jones had never felt so out of place. She ran a hand through her natural curls and stood tall, adjusting the sleek black dress she had chosen to wear. Today, this was going to be her moment. After years of scraping together enough money for a down payment, she was finally ready to buy the car she'd been dreaming of. The Ford Explorer, brand new, gleaming in the showroom, practically calling her name. She took a deep breath as she entered the dealership, the cool air conditioning hitting her face in a welcome blast. She'd walked through dealerships before, but this one, with its polished floors and glossy glass windows, was different. She knew it was upscale. She'd saved up for this moment. She was ready. The showroom was quiet, almost serene. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the vehicles. Maya felt her nerves slip away as she walked down the center aisle, gliding past the shiny rows of cars. She'd earned this. No one could take it from her. And then she saw him. Lance, the salesperson, sitting behind the desk with his phone in hand, swiping through it with a bored expression. His name tag gleamed under the overhead light, but his eyes never lifted. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. Maya hesitated. She cleared her throat, hoping he would take the hint. "Excuse me," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I'm interested in the Explorer." Lance glanced up briefly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. But instead of greeting her with the enthusiasm she expected, he gave her a quick once-over, his gaze cold and dismissive. It wasn't the first time she felt the weight of someone sizing her up, but it hit harder now. "Yeah, that's a nice one," he said, barely meeting her eyes. "But I think you might want to look at something else." He waved a hand toward the back of the showroom, dismissing her with a motion that spoke volumes. You should try the used cars. Better prices. Maya froze, a lump forming in her throat. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like she didn't belong in this space. Like she wasn't worthy of a new car. The anger rose in her chest, but she held it in, afraid of how it might come out. She forced herself to speak. "Excuse me," she asked again, her tone shaking just slightly. "I'm really interested in this one." Lance didn't even bother to look up again. "It's out of your price range," he said, flatly, his voice like a knife. Maya felt something snap inside her, but before she could gather her thoughts, he added, "You can't afford it. You should stick with the older models." The words burned. She wanted to scream, to make him understand the weight of his dismissal. But all she could do was nod, turning toward the door. Her heart pounded in her ears. She should leave. She had to leave. But just as her fingers brushed the door handle, she heard it, the sharp click of a camera. Lance was taking her picture. The air in the room felt thick as she turned back to him, her body frozen in place. She saw the flash, the smug satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't think she belonged here, and now, it seemed, he was going to make sure everyone knew it. Maya's stomach twisted, and for a second, she felt the weight of every moment of discrimination she'd ever faced. It wasn't just one bad encounter. This was bigger. This was personal, and she wasn't going to let it go. The car door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in her mind. She had no idea then that this was only the beginning. Maya sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dealership's gleaming facade in the rearview mirror. Her breath came in shallow bursts. It had been a simple interaction, but it felt like so much more, like a brush of the hand on a wound that never healed. The sting of it pulsed in her chest, but there was a fire building too, something she hadn't expected. She could hear Lance's voice in her head, mocking her. "You can't afford it." "Damn him," she muttered under her breath, her voice almost lost in the echo of the empty parking lot. She pulled her phone from the cup holder, scrolling through Instagram mindlessly until Sarah's name popped up in her notifications. Sarah was Maya's closest friend, a fellow lawyer who had worked beside her on countless cases. Sarah had always been the firecracker, the one who wasn't afraid to call out injustice at the drop of a hat. Maya, on the other hand, had always been a little quieter, more patient, always thinking before speaking. But today, the patient side of her was burning away. Maya clicked open the message. "Sarah, how'd it go at the dealership?" Maya stared at the words, biting her lip. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then she began to type, the words spilling out faster than she could think. "Maya, the car I wanted, they told me I couldn't afford it." Just like that. And then, he. She paused, recalling the smug look in Lance's eyes as he dismissed her. Her fingers froze. But she didn't stop typing. The words were pouring out of her now, raw and angry. "Maya, he took a picture of me. I think I was a joke to him. It's not just one person. Sarah, it's the whole system." Her phone buzzed with Sarah's immediate reply. "Sarah, are you serious? This happens all the time. What's your next move?" Maya's mind raced. What was her next move? She could let it slide, pretend it didn't happen. But the rage that had been building in her chest wouldn't let her ignore it. She couldn't let Lance, or the dealership, get away with this. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of something much bigger. A moment of clarity settled over her. Maybe this time, she thought, I can make it different. "Maya, I'm going to post about it." There was a pause before Sarah replied, and when the message came, it was exactly what Maya needed to hear. "Sarah, you know, Maya, you don't always have to be polite. You've got every right to speak up. Do it. The world needs to see what they are doing." Maya's pulse quickened. She'd written about injustice before, sure, but sharing her own story, her voice shaking, the vulnerability that came with it, it was terrifying. But Sarah was right. She wasn't going to let Lance's disrespect slip away unnoticed. Maya opened Instagram and started a new post. She included a photo of the dealership from earlier, the sleek cars and pristine windows reflecting the sun. Below, she wrote, "Today I walked into a dealership, ready to make a big purchase, only to be dismissed and told I couldn't afford the car I wanted. I was told to go look at used cars, as if my dreams are only allowed to be second-rate. And then the salesman took a picture of me. This happens every day. It's not just about one bad experience. It's a pattern of systemic racism in places we trust. I won't stand for it. She tagged the dealership in the post and hit Shay. She sat back in her seat and stared at the phone screen, her heart thudding in her chest. The seconds dragged by, the silence around her punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. It felt like the world held its breath. And then, ding, the first notification appeared. It was a like, then another, then more. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Comments and shares flooded in from people she didn't know, people from all walks of life who had experienced similar things. But what caught her attention most was a private message she received not long after the post went live. It was from an unfamiliar name, journalist_Timothy at abc.com. Timothy, Maya, I'm with ABC News. I read your post and would love to get your thoughts for an article on racial discrimination in the automotive industry. Could we schedule an interview? Her stomach dropped. This was no longer just a social media post. This was real. She stared at the message for a long time, fighting the urge to delete it, but she knew she couldn't. Her story, her truth, was no longer just her own. This was bigger than her now. Maya took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed a reply. Maya, yes, let's talk. As Maya put the phone down, the weight of what she had done started to sink in. Her post was already gaining traction. There was no turning back now. But what would it mean? Could she really expose the systemic racism in the dealership, and in others like it, without facing even worse consequences? Her mind spun, but she didn't feel the familiar fear of a moment ago. Instead, she felt something else. Something strong. Something that hadn't been there before. Resistance. And it was only just beginning. The ringing phone startled Maya out of a deep, frustrated sleep. Her phone glowed in the dim light of her bedroom, and for a moment, she didn't recognize a number. But then it clicked. She had been expecting a call, and now it was here. Her heart skipped a beat, unsure whether it was excitement or fear that caused a flutter in her chest. She rubbed her eyes and answered, her voice groggy but steady. Hello. Ms. Jones, this is Rachel Thornton, manager at Willowbrook Auto Sales. How are you today? The voice on the other end was too smooth, too practiced, and the forced friendliness made Maya's stomach churn. I'm fine, thank you, Maya replied cautiously, sitting up in bed. Her mind raced. She had been bracing for this call, knowing the dealership would try to smooth things over. They had to know she wasn't going to back down. How can I help you? Rachel's tone softened, almost too sweet. I'm so sorry to hear about your recent experience. That was never our intention, I assure you. I wanted to personally apologize for the misunderstanding. Maya could hear the falseness in Rachel's voice. It wasn't the apology of someone who truly cared. It was the apology of someone who had been given the order to handle the situation before it got worse. Maya clenched her fists on her lap, every part of her wanting to call it out, but she stayed calm, letting Rachel continue. I'd like to invite you back to our dealership. I'm offering you a special discount on any vehicle, including the Explorer you were looking at. We'd be happy to have you as a customer, and I'm confident we can make this right. The offer was laced with condescension, a thinly veiled attempt at pacification. Maya could almost hear Rachel imagining her gratefulness, her eagerness to accept the deal and make the incident go away. But the sting of what had happened still lingered. The dismissal, the disrespect, the image of Lance taking her photo. No apology could erase that. Maya's voice was sharp now, even though she kept her words measured. I'm not interested in a discount, Rachel. I'm interested in accountability. Rachel's pause was noticeable. It was as if she hadn't expected that response, as if she thought Maya would accept the apology and leave it at that. But Maya wasn't backing down. Not now. I understand your frustration, Ms. Jones, but we value all our customers, regardless of their background, Rachel said, the words like a rehearsed script. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Our staff has been instructed to treat everyone with the utmost respect. Maya cut her off, the anger boiling just beneath the surface. Lance didn't treat me with respect. He dismissed me and then took a picture of me without my permission. That's not a misunderstanding, Rachel. That's a problem. It's a pattern. Silence hung between them for a beat. Maya could almost picture Rachel's tight smile turning to something more defensive, more calculating. After a moment, Rachel spoke again, but this time her tone was colder. I understand you're upset, Ms. Jones, but you need to understand that the dealership is a business, and we don't need this kind of publicity. I would strongly advise you to reconsider what you've posted online. It could damage our reputation. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. The words were no longer veiled threats. They were blatant. Rachel was making it clear, back off or face consequences. But Maya wasn't backing off. She was just getting started. I'm not the one who's damaging anyone's reputation, Rachel, Maya said, each word deliberate. Your dealership is already doing that. This isn't just about me. This is about the way black customers are treated. It's a systemic problem. You can try to sweep it under the rug, but that's not going to work anymore. The line was quiet for a moment, the silence deafening. Finally, Rachel spoke again, and her voice had changed. It was no longer trying to be pleasant. I see. Well, if you continue with your campaign, I suggest you think about the consequences. We're a large business with resources, Ms. Jones, and we will take legal action if necessary. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Maya knew what Rachel was trying to do, intimidate her into silence, make her back off. But there was something in Maya now, something stronger than fear. The thought of letting them win, of letting them silence her like this, twisted her gut. Maya's grip tightened on the phone, and she could hear the edge in her own voice as she replied, "Go ahead and take legal action, Rachel. You might find that it's not just me you'll be dealing with." Rachel's voice went tight, her words clipped. "Goodbye, Ms. Jones." The call ended abruptly. Maya sat there, her breath heavy, the weight of the conversation sinking in. The nerve of Rachel to try to threaten her with legal action as if she didn't know exactly how this would go. They weren't going to bully her into silence. If anything, this was just more proof of the dealership's disregard for people like her. She leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the street below. A deep breath filled her lungs. The fight was far from over. If anything, it had just begun. Maya opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers flying over the keys. She would take the next step. She would make sure the world knew what Willowbrook Auto Sales was trying to bury. She wasn't backing down now. The air in Maya's apartment felt thick with tension as she sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face. The call from Rachel had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, but it also sparked something inside her, a resolve, a need to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the dealership's actions. She couldn't let this be brushed under the rug. There was more at play here. The whole situation smelled like a system of racial bias, and she wasn't going to stop until she could prove it. She opened her browser and began searching. Her fingers moved quickly, typing phrases like Willowbrook Auto Sales racial discrimination and dealership racial complaints. The first few results were typical: positive reviews, company press releases, happy customers. But Maya wasn't looking for those. She kept digging, knowing there had to be something hidden beneath the shiny surface. It wasn't long before she found a forum thread, buried deep in a local complaint site. The title caught her eye: Unfair Treatment at Willowbrook Auto Sales, an open letter to the dealership. Maya clicked on the link, and what she found made her stomach churn. The post was long, detailing the experiences of a woman named Jessica, a black customer who had gone to Willowbrook 2 years ago. Jessica's story mirrored Maya's in so many ways. She'd gone in with the intent to buy a car, but when she tried to test drive a new model, she was quickly told it was out of her budget, even though she'd come in prepared with financing options. The salesman had been rude and dismissive, just like Lance, and when Jessica had asked about other vehicles, she was told she should consider a used car instead. The more Jessica wrote, the angrier Maya became. The comments underneath the post were equally damning. Others shared their own stories of being turned away, treated with condescension, or blatantly ignored. One man, a former employee, posted a long message about how salespeople were subtly encouraged to prioritize white customers, ensuring that they felt comfortable and confident in their purchases, while black customers were given the cold shoulder. Maya's hand hovered over the mouse as she read through the testimonies. There was a consistent pattern here. Subtle racism disguised as poor customer service, and no one had done anything about it. No one had taken the time to investigate. It made her blood boil. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a systemic issue. Willowbrook Auto Sales wasn't just guilty of one mistake. They were perpetuating a culture of discrimination, one that went unchecked and unnoticed by most. A new resolve filled her chest. This couldn't be just another social media post. Maya needed to bring the truth to light. She needed to go public with this, to expose the dealership for what it was, a business built on bias and inequality. But she couldn't do it alone. She grabbed her phone and dialed Sarah's number. The phone rang twice before Sarah picked up. "Hey, what's up?" Sarah's voice was as upbeat as always, but Maya could hear the underlying concern from the past few days in her tone. "I found something," Maya said, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "It's worse than I thought. Willowbrook Auto Sales has been doing this for years. I found multiple complaints, and I'm sure there's more." There was a brief silence on the other end before Sarah spoke. "What kind of complaints?" "Racial discrimination. Sarah, customers being turned away, being told their financing options weren't good enough. One person said she was flat out told to look at used cars because she was black." Maya's voice shook slightly as she spoke, the weight of the realization hitting her full force. "I knew it wasn't just Lance," Sarah replied, the anger in her voice evident. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to expose it," Maya said, the words coming with the finality of a decision she couldn't take back. "But I can't do it alone. I need more evidence, more people who are willing to come forward. We need to show how deep this goes." "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked. "I mean, this could get really messy. You know how these businesses are. They have a lot of power." Maya took a deep breath, pushing down the fear that crept up with Sarah's words. "I'm sure. I've been quiet for too long. Sarah, we've all been quiet. This ends now." Later that night, Maya started reaching out to the people who had posted on the forum. She carefully worded her messages, introducing herself and explaining what she was trying to do. To her surprise, people responded quickly. Many were hesitant at first, afraid of backlash or retribution from the dealership, but Maya assured them that they would be anonymous if they wanted. Over the next few days, the stories poured in, dozens of people, all with similar experiences. Each one had been dismissed, turned away, or treated with suspicion by the salespeople at Willowbrook Auto Sales. Maya spent hours collecting testimonies, organizing them into a cohesive narrative that would make the truth impossible to deny. She reached out to some of the people who had been turned away, even offering to help them contact a lawyer if they were interested in pursuing legal action. But she knew that just gathering stories wasn't enough. She needed the media to get involved, to amplify the voices of the people who had been silenced for so long. Maya sat in her living room one night, staring at the screen of her laptop, the weight of the project finally hitting her. This was bigger than she had imagined, and if she was going to do this right, she needed to go to the press. She called Timothy from ABC News. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number, but when he answered, his voice was warm and welcoming. "Ms. Jones, I'm glad you called back. I've been following your story. I think we can really make a difference here." Maya nodded, feeling her heart pound in her chest. "I've got more than just my story. I've got evidence, testimonies, and the truth about how Willowbrook Auto Sales has been treating black customers. I'm ready to go public with this. I want to make sure it's not just my voice that's heard. I want everyone to hear the stories of the people they silenced." Timothy was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "We'll get to work on it. I'll send a team over tomorrow. This is going to be big. Maya, you're not just making noise. You're making a stand." Maya exhaled deeply, the weight of everything she had learned crashing into her. But it wasn't fear she felt now. It was something else, something far stronger. She wasn't just taking on a dealership. She was taking on a system. And she wasn't going to stop until it was torn down. Maya's inbox was flooded. Every time she refreshed her email, new messages poured in, more people willing to share their stories about Willowbrook Auto Sales, more voices echoing the pain and frustration Maya herself had felt. As much as she was overwhelmed, there was something powerful in the flood of support. The shared experiences were starting to paint a clearer picture. This was bigger than a single incident. This was a pattern of systemic racism, and Maya wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. She sat in front of her laptop late one night, sipping coffee, her fingers moving quickly over the keys as she composed another message to one of the people who'd reached out. They had asked for privacy, but they also wanted their voices heard. Maya understood that. She respected their hesitation. This kind of fight came with consequences. But she also knew that staying silent wouldn't change anything. The next day, she and Sarah met up for lunch at a small cafe. Maya needed Sarah's counsel, her ability to think strategically, to help her navigate this with care and focus. Over their plates of salad and soup, they went over their plans. "I can't believe how many people have reached out," Sarah said, shaking her head in disbelief. "It's like a whole underground network of people who've been mistreated, but no one ever talks about it." "I think that's the point," Maya replied. "They've all been silenced one way or another. Maybe they don't even realize how much power their stories have when put together." She looked down at her phone, which had buzzed on the table. "It's bigger than I thought. I've got testimonies from across the city now. People from all different walks of life, from professionals to students. And it's not just Willowbrook. This is happening everywhere." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "That's why this is so important. You've got a chance to expose a whole system of exclusion. And if you play it right, you could do more than just get attention. You could force real change." Maya nodded, her fingers drumming on the table. "That's what I'm hoping for. I've contacted a few people at the local news, and I've already got a meeting scheduled with one of the producers at ABC News. They want to make this a bigger story. The problem is, I can't do this alone. I need more people to step forward. If we want to change things, we need to show that it's not just me being a one-off case." Sarah's eyes brightened with the idea. "Why don't we organize a meeting? Bring the voices together, those who are willing to speak out. A little solidarity goes a long way." Maya hesitated, biting her lip. The thought of gathering everyone, of having them sit down and speak about their experiences, filled her with both dread and excitement. It would be a huge step forward, but it would also be vulnerable, raw. She knew that some people would be afraid to put their names out there, worried about retaliation from Willowbrook or even the broader community. The risks were high. "I'll send the invitations," Maya said, the decision solidifying in her mind. "It'll be a safe space. I'll make sure no one feels forced to speak if they're not ready." Over the next few days, Maya worked tirelessly to set up the meeting. She compiled a list of all the people who had reached out, contacted some legal advisors for support, and reached out to her contact at ABC News to make sure they would have a crew available to cover it. Sarah helped with the logistics, and together they found a quiet community center room to host everyone. Maya's heart raced with anticipation as the day approached. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a chance for something much bigger. When the day arrived, Maya was anxious. She hadn't expected the amount of support she'd received. Over 30 people had RSVP'd. She wasn't sure how many would show up, but the fact that so many had committed to coming made the reality of what they were doing feel much more tangible. The room was set up with a circle of chairs, each one neatly placed around a large table in the center. Maya had provided a light lunch and some refreshments. The walls were bare, offering no distractions, just a space to share stories and experiences. Maya arrived early, making sure everything was ready. The first few people began trickling in, and Maya greeted them with a smile, trying to calm the nervous energy that had taken hold of her. She could feel the weight of it all, the responsibility, the pressure, but with every handshake and nod, her resolve strengthened. "Hi, Maya," a voice called. Maya turned to see a tall woman with short, curly hair step into the room. "I'm Jessica," she said, her eyes lighting up as she shook Maya's hand. "Thank you for organizing this. I've been wanting to speak out for a long time." Maya smiled, feeling a spark of hope. "You're not alone. We're all in this together." As more people filed in, the room began to fill with quiet chatter. Maya took a moment to look around. She saw the faces of people who had been overlooked, undervalued, and ignored for too long. They were here now, united in a desire for justice. The air felt thick with anticipation. When the room had filled, Maya stood up, and the murmurs died down. She cleared her throat and looked around at the faces that had gathered. Some were younger, some older, some were professionals, others students. All of them had a story to share. "I know it's hard to speak up," Maya began, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of every eye on her. "But we're here because our voices matter. Willowbrook Auto Sales isn't the only place where this happens. This is a systemic issue. We've all experienced it. And now, we're going to make sure the world knows about it." A murmur of agreement passed through the group. One by one, people began to share their experiences. Some were quiet, their voices trembling. Others were more confident, their words direct and powerful. Each story was like a brick in the foundation of something bigger. Maya could feel the power of their collective voices, the strength and unity. As the meeting continued, Maya felt a sense of purpose fill her. This wasn't just about Willowbrook anymore. This was about all the places where discrimination went unchecked, about the countless people who suffered in silence. They weren't silent anymore. The following week, Maya's plan took on a new dimension. She was going public, in a way that couldn't be ignored. The room full of voices, all sharing their stories, had stirred something deep within her. The passion in the voices of those who had suffered, the pain in their words. Maya knew it was time to take it to the streets. It wasn't enough to post on social media or meet behind closed doors. They had to be seen. They had to be heard. Maya worked with Sarah, crafting a plan for a peaceful protest outside Willowbrook Auto Sales. The media had already started picking up the story, and the more people she spoke to, the more the frustration grew. The anger wasn't just about one bad interaction. It was about years of mistreatment, about being invisible in places where they should have been respected, welcomed, and treated like any other customer. It was a fight against the power structures that allowed this behavior to persist. "I've spoken to a few more people," Sarah said one evening as they worked on the protest plan. "We have more than enough support for this, but we need to make sure it's peaceful. No matter how upset we are, we can't give them an excuse to silence us." "I know," Maya replied. "This is about making noise the right way. We want them to see us. We want them to feel the weight of our voices. We're not just here to complain. We're here to make a change." They agreed to set the date for the protest. Saturday afternoon, the busiest time for the dealership. Maya contacted a local news station, gave them the details, and within hours, they confirmed their coverage. The tension in the air was palpable, but Maya's determination kept her grounded. This was more than just a moment. This was the beginning of a movement. The day of the protest arrived, and the air outside Willowbrook Auto Sales crackled with anticipation. Maya stood at the front of a small crowd, her heart beating heavily in her chest. The sun was bright in the sky, casting a hot glare across the asphalt parking lot, but Maya was too focused to notice the heat. The sign she and others had made was sharp with bold, black letters: "End racism in car dealerships and Black Lives Matter in business." Dozens of people stood behind her, their faces filled with resolve. Some were strangers who had heard about the protests on social media. Others were the very people Maya had met in the community center meeting. Maya knew they were nervous. They were risking a lot by being here. There was a lot at stake. But this was bigger than fear. They had all been silenced for too long. "All right, everyone," Maya called, stepping onto the makeshift platform, a small wooden crate she had found in the corner of the protest space. "This is our time. We're not here to fight. We're here to demand respect. Respect for our voices. Respect for our dollars. Respect for our lives. Willowbrook Auto Sales doesn't just owe me an apology. They owe all of us one." A cheer went up from the crowd, the words ringing out with fervor. "They owe us," a woman called out. Maya smiled, feeling a surge of power in the moment. This was it. This was their moment. The protest grew louder as more people arrived. News crews set up, their cameras capturing the growing number of people standing in front of the dealership. Maya looked across the line of people. She recognized faces. Jessica, the woman who had shared her story about being turned away for financing. There was Karen, who had been told her credit wasn't good enough when she tried to buy a car at Willowbrook. Everyone had a story, and now they were all standing together. A man in a suit, one of the managers, she assumed, came out from the dealership. His expression was tight, his posture stiff, like he wasn't sure whether to approach or retreat. Rachel Thornton, the manager who had called Maya earlier, appeared beside him. Her face was a mask of professionalism, but Maya could see the tension in her jaw, the slight flick of her eyes to the growing crowd. "Stay calm," Sarah whispered, standing next to Maya. "Don't let them provoke you." Maya nodded. "We're here for one reason and one reason only: accountability. We've been ignored for too long, Sarah, and it's time they hear us." The dealership staff began to stir nervously, looking out the windows at the protesters gathering outside. But Maya noticed something. It wasn't just the staff that seemed uneasy. There were people standing on the sidewalks, curious, taking pictures, some even nodding in support. Then, the first chant rose from the crowd, quiet at first, but growing louder by the second. "No justice, no peace." Maya felt a rush of adrenaline flood her veins. The words weren't just a chant, they were a declaration. The people outside Willowbrook Auto Sales weren't just protesting an individual incident. They were demanding change to the entire system that allowed businesses like this one to perpetuate racial bias without consequence. As the crowd grew, so did the energy. People were stopping to join in, some holding their phones high, capturing the protest to share with their networks. Maya saw Rachel Thornton speak briefly to her staff, and it was clear that they were feeling the pressure. The dealership had never had a protest like this before. The power was shifting. Maya stepped up, her voice booming into the microphone that had been set up for her. "This is about every single black person who's ever been dismissed, turned away, or told they didn't belong. It's not just about me. It's not just about one bad salesman. It's a pattern, a culture of racism that needs to end, and it's time we all stand together to say we will not be silent anymore." The crowd erupted into applause. Maya's heart swelled. She knew this protest was only the beginning. The pressure was building, on the dealership, on the people who had ignored these voices for too long. But Maya wasn't finished. She wasn't backing down. The protest was a spark. The real fight would come in the days ahead. The protest outside Willowbrook Auto Sales had become a spectacle, a tipping point that the dealership could no longer ignore. For the first time, Maya could sense the cracks in the dealership's carefully crafted image. She watched from across the street as staff hurriedly ducked in and out of the showroom, casting nervous glances at the growing crowd of protesters. It was clear they hadn't expected this kind of pushback. They hadn't anticipated that their casual disregard for black customers would ever come to light in such a forceful way. But Maya had never expected anything less. As the crowd chanted louder and news outlets continued to report, Maya's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from journalists, allies, and even strangers expressing their support. It was overwhelming, but Maya held firm. She could feel the shift happening, and she knew this was only the beginning. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw it was from an unknown number. Her heart skipped. "Hello?" She answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maya." The voice on the other end was low, cautious. "I don't have much time, but I think you need to hear this." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Who is this?" "My name's Malik. I used to work at Willowbrook Auto Sales, over in the back office. I've seen things that I think you need to know." Maya leaned against the wall of her apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the inside information she'd been hoping for. She felt the adrenaline surge through her body. "Go on," she urged, her voice steady but sharp. "There's been a pattern of ignoring black customers for years. It's not just what Lance did to you, it's the whole operation. I've seen reports, and I heard staff talking about how customers of color are specifically directed toward lower-tier cars, push into used cars, told their credit isn't good enough. It's subtle, but it's there, and I'm not the only one who's seen it." Maya's stomach dropped. This wasn't just hearsay. This was real. She had the proof now, but hearing it from someone who had worked in the dealership's back office made it feel even more visceral. Malik wasn't just a disgruntled former employee. He was someone who had seen the systematic manipulation from the inside. "I can get you some of the paperwork," Malik continued, his voice a little more desperate now. "I can send over internal records that show which customers were steered away, who was given preferential treatment. It's all there. I can't do this alone. Though, I'm scared. They'll fire me if they find out I said anything." Maya bit her lip, her mind racing. This was the break she needed. Real evidence. something that would prove the dealership's systemic bias beyond a shadow of a doubt. But Malik was right. This was dangerous. It wasn't just about him losing his job. There was a real threat here, one that had already made Maya and the others targets. "I'll make sure it's anonymous," Maya said, her voice firm. "I won't let them do anything to you. Just send me what you can, and we'll take it from there." Malik paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with uncertainty. "You don't know what you're up against. These people are connected. Maya, the power they have in the community, in the media, it's not just the dealership you're fighting. It's the system." "I'm not afraid," Maya replied, her voice strong. "I've come this far. I'm not backing down now." There was a long pause on the line before Malik spoke again. "All right, I'll send it over. But be careful. They won't let this slide easily." Maya hung up the phone, her pulse racing. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. This was bigger than she'd ever anticipated. But the more she thought about it, the clearer the path became. Malik's documents were going to be the final piece she needed to take Willowbrook Auto Sales down for good. The public pressure, the protests, the growing media coverage, it was all working in her favor. But she knew that it was a double-edged sword. The more she exposed, the more the dealership would fight back. This was no longer just about her personal experience. This was a battle for every black customer who had been mistreated in silence for far too long. She wasn't just fighting for her own justice anymore. She was fighting for something much larger than that. The following day, Maya received an encrypted email from Malik. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside were several attachments, documents, internal memos, customer reports, all detailing the patterns of bias that had been so carefully concealed. The records were damning. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Clear evidence that Willowbrook Auto Sales had deliberately discriminated against black buyers, sending them away with lower-tier cars and offering them higher interest rates without any justification. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the documents. This was it, the evidence she had been fighting for. The truth was finally out in the open. Maya knew that she couldn't wait. The time had come to act. She immediately called Sarah, her voice sharp with determination. "It's time. I've got the documents. We need to go public with this now." Sarah's response was immediate. "Let's do it." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing the story, piecing everything together, the testimonies, the protest footage, and the internal documents. Maya was exhausted, but the adrenaline kept her going. By the time they were finished, the story had grown beyond anything she had imagined. It wasn't just about her and her fight. It was a story of resilience, of the strength in numbers, and of the power of truth. Maya sat back in her chair, looking at the finished article. The headline sent a jolt through her heart. "Whistleblower reveals systemic racism at Willowbrook Auto Sales. Dealership accused of discriminating against black customers." The article went live that evening, and within minutes, social media erupted. The hashtag #EndRacism at Willowbrook was trending, and the story was picked up by major news outlets. The weight of it all settled over Maya as she watched the reactions pour in: anger, support, disbelief. Willowbrook Auto Sales was no longer just a business. It was a symbol of a system that had failed too many people for too long. Maya knew that the fight wasn't over. There would be backlash. There would be resistance. But in this moment, she could breathe. The truth was out, and the world was listening. The days following the release of the article felt like a whirlwind. Maya couldn't keep up with the calls, the emails, the messages. Her phone buzzed constantly, each new notification bringing a mixture of support, anger, and even threats. The spotlight was on Willowbrook Auto Sales in a way they had never imagined. Maya had expected pushback, but the sheer scale of the response was overwhelming. It was like watching a tidal wave crash over the dealership, exposing everything it had tried to hide. The protests outside Willowbrook intensified. Local activists joined in, rallying for justice, calling for accountability. The news station sent reporters to cover the story. The community, once divided and quiet, had found its voice. They were standing together now. Maya sat in her apartment, her gaze fixed on the TV screen, where the evening news was covering the latest developments. The anchor's voice was calm but firm as she read the headline. "Willowbrook Auto Sales faces allegations of systemic racism. Dealership under investigation." Maya exhaled deeply. This was real. This was happening. The dealership was no longer a respected business in the eyes of the public. They were the subject of national scrutiny. But even as she absorbed the victory, she couldn't shake the lingering tension in her chest. The fight was far from over. The articles and protests were just beginning. She knew the dealership would fight back, try to salvage what was left of their reputation. But Maya wasn't going to stop. She couldn't. A week later, Maya received an unexpected call from her contact at ABC News, Timothy. His voice was tense but controlled. "Maya, I have some news. It's big. Willowbrook has decided to take legal action. They are filing a lawsuit against you and the media outlets covering the story, claiming defamation and alleging that the protests were incited by misleading information." Maya's stomach sank. A lawsuit was expected. She knew it was coming, but hearing it confirmed was a blow. They were trying to silence her, to intimidate her into backing down. The dealership had the money, the resources, and the connections to drag this out in court for years. Maya felt the weight of it, the very real possibility that this could cost her everything. But then, Timothy added something that made her pulse quicken. Here's the twist. An anonymous source inside Willowbrook just leaked internal memos. "It's huge, Maya. They confirm everything you said." The documents show that the dealership management directly instructed staff to steer black customers toward lower-tier cars, and even force them to accept higher interest rates. This isn't just your word against theirs anymore. Maya sat back in her chair, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She couldn't believe it. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The memos would seal the deal. They'll be released in the morning. The legal action may still go forward, but this leak, this changes everything. Maya's heart thudded in her chest. She could hardly believe it. This was a moment she had been fighting for. The truth would come out, no matter how much Willowbrook tried to bury it. And now, it was only a matter of time before the public demanded action. The next day, the leaked memos were everywhere. News outlets exploded with coverage, and social media erupted in outrage. The memos, along with the internal reports, were irrefutable proof of the dealership's discriminatory practices. The documents were signed by key management members, and the instructions were clear. Black customers were to be given less attention, pushed toward used vehicles, and discouraged from exploring higher-end models. As the news spread, the pressure mounted. There was no turning back now. Willowbrook was on the defensive, scrambling to salvage their reputation. The CEO, who had remained silent throughout the protest, was forced to issue a public apology. It was too little, too late. The damage was done. Then came the announcement. Rachel Thornton, the manager who had been so quick to dismiss Maya's concerns in the phone call, was fired. Lance, the salesman who had taken Maya's picture in the showroom, was also let go. The dealership issued a statement claiming that the firings were due to the egregious nature of the allegations, but it was clear to everyone that these were actions of self-preservation. Maya felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over her as she read the news. The people who had perpetuated the system of bias, who had belittled and dismissed customers like her for years, were finally being held accountable. But it wasn't just about the people who lost their jobs. It was about the entire system. The dealership had been forced to reckon with the truth, to face the consequences of their actions in a way they couldn't ignore. But even as Maya watched the dominoes fall, she knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. She wasn't sure what the future held for her. The lawsuit was still looming, and she was already bracing for the legal battles ahead. The emotional toll was heavy. She had given so much of herself to this cause. The sleepless nights, the constant pressure, the fear of retaliation, it had taken its toll. One evening, as she sat at her desk, she glanced at the framed photo on her shelf, a picture of her family, her parents smiling proudly as they stood beside her at her law school graduation. She hadn't spoken to them much about the protest or the article. They were proud of her. Yes, but this was a fight they didn't fully understand. Her mom had always told her to pick her battles, and Maya had picked this one. The phone rang again, breaking her thoughts. It was Sarah. "Maya, we did it," Sarah said, her voice full of relief. "Willowbrook is done. The pressure is too much. They've already started making changes internally. It's not over yet, but it's a huge step." Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The battle wasn't over, But the victory was undeniable. She'd started something that couldn't be undone. The system had been exposed, and though the fight wasn't finished, there was now a chance for real change. "Thank you, Sarah," Maya said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you, without everyone who stood by me." The line was quiet for a moment, and then Sarah's voice broke through. "You did it, Maya. You changed the game." Maya smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. She had fought for something bigger than herself. She had fought for the truth. And in the end, the truth had won.